That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Portland.
Thanks very much.
Good to see you again. Just fresh off Seattle. How was Seattle last night? Good times?
Yeah, Seattle was wild. It was, it was interesting. I flew in yesterday from Australia. I woke up sort of many, many hours ago, hours before, on the river. Said goodbye to the country and hopped on a few modes of transport. Went through the air at 100 million miles an hour in a tube.
Right.
With wings.
Yeah. Plane.
And a whole bunch of other people's vibes and energies all stuffed into a tube and shot through the air at 100 miles an hour, landed in Seattle, straight into sound check. And then a beautiful vibe, good people last night. It was lovely. It was really nice. Nice to be back in America, and I had a nice warm welcome in Seattle, and nice to get to Portland.
Stop number 2.
Yeah.
Xavier's at the Wonder Ballroom tonight. Are you solo or with the band?
I'm solo.
If you guys have never had a chance to see him solo, his setup is not quite like this. He's has I don't know how many instruments you have surrounding you. It looks like Neil Peart's drum kit. Have you ever seen Rush? It's this massive instruments in front of you. How many instruments can you play? Have you ever kept track of how many instruments you've mastered at this point?
No, I don't know if I've mastered any of them, but I have a crack at I don't know, maybe about 15 I use live. But it's all just different. It's different,
Yeah.
Like this, when I was last album I did with the South African rhythm section, Tio and Andy. This album, Spirit Bird, I did solo. So depending on my setup, there's more. So I'm using more stuff when I play solo, and I'm also sampling birds. I used 30 species of Australian birds on this record. So it's all real time. It's all live, but I've got triggers of recorded samples of birds. So it's in my percussion setup when I'm playing yidakis with didgeridoos and drums and things. I got birds and I'm triggering, and I got some birds and I'm triggering with my feet.
You got to implement the live birds into the set.
Yeah.
Have you ever picked up? He's like 15 instruments plus. Have you ever picked up an instrument and just went, no, forget it. I'm not even going to bother with this one? There's got to be like an instrument where you're like, I got this one. I got this. I can play this. I play 15 instruments at a...
Yeah, I've never really liked anything to be a chore or to practice anything too much, If it doesn't come natural, then I just leave it to the experts.
Wow. All those have come natural? That seems like it'd be such a process.
Everything I play has come natural, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're pretty close to, we're pretty close, geologically to Canada. It seems like you've got quite a connection with Canada. You've spent a lot of time there. You've have great success there. You've recorded some of your records there. What's the connection with you and Canada?
I don't know. I when I first started going overseas to play music, I played in Canada and got huge support. People were really supportive of what I was doing. I sort of lived in a van for a while and went to ski hills and played music and snowboarded, So that was cool because, I could do both pretty cheaply. And I liked those times, it was mellow and people were, just kind of, there was regular people that would come and see me, but it was all pretty mellow.
Right, good vibe.
And then, and it was, it was pretty cruisy, but then, now it's a different scene.
Well, it's hard to do it cheap now. Ski resorts are getting crazy, big.
Well, when I started touring, that was probably nearly, I don't know how long ago now, a dozen years since then I've been doing the international circuit, and it becomes, when, there's agents and managers and tour buses and things, it's all a lot faster. You don't really get to stop off at a ski hill. So I miss that part of it because I very rarely do a gig at a ski hill anymore, but it was cool.
You come back more in the wintertime, we'll get you over to Mount Hood. We'll get you up there real quick.
I'm a little bit afraid of, November in Canada is pretty cold.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit afraid of February.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Be a hassle.
I've done it.
Yeah?
And I remember one time this bus driver in Canada was driving us down the wrong side of the highway in February, and there was snow all over the road into oncoming traffic. That was pretty weird. That made me afraid of February.
Yeah, that'd be tough. I'm not going back there in February. The new album is Spirit Bird, the new record, the new album. I took a quiz on the internet today to find out what kind of bird I was. I don't know if it's very legit, because A, it's on the internet, and B, it asks questions like how smart I was and how many friends I have. I'm a white falcon. For the record, I'm a white falcon. You can do something. I don't know what that means.
That's pretty cool, dude.
I don't even know what it means.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah?
It's a bird of prey.
What about you? What's your spirit bird, and what is the interpretation, and how does that relate to this new album?
I'll play the song later, but Spirit Bird, the song, was pretty fascinating. I've had ever since I've been a little boy, I've had a lot of spirit come up through me in the form of music, and, understanding that in my mind is probably something I'll never really achieve other than just ego. So, I kind of hold a space for spirit when it comes through and just let it come through me in the form of song, and I try not to involve my mind so much. I just sort of put it together with my brain and feel the spirit of the music, let it happen, out of respect for whatever it is that spirit is that's coming through me and my culture from back home. And I feel like, the same way that you wouldn't tell your grandmother what to wear to church, you just let it be. And so the song Spirit Bird came through me very, very powerfully up in the northwest in a place called the Kimberley, which was one of the last great wildernesses on our planet, in the northwest of Australia. It's got no recorded extinctions. It's the biggest humpback whale calving ground in the world. It's the oldest culture that ever existed that predates the Wandjina people, the Aboriginal people of the area. Exists up there in rock paintings. No one knows what it is. Like, it's a very mystical, interesting place. And the Western Australian government is it wants to put a huge gas plant, the biggest LNG plant that the country's ever seen up in the Kimberley coast, which would be devastating environmentally. And it's a world issue, it's not just Australia, it's our world we need to protect, and we're all one mob. And so for the last about 5 years I was working on that project, and through that I was going up to the Kimberley. And the Kimberley's a very powerful country, and then, from there I had this whole sort of self journey that unfolded up on the Kimberley and went on this whole spirit thing through that country. It's very, very powerful, very ancient, probably what they would call in America is the outback, it's got that vibe. So it's sort of middle of nowhere. And then one day I was coming from a sacred site, and I was driving on a track, and I had this urge to stop, and I got out of the car and turned around, and there was a big mob of red-tailed black cockatoos in the tree. And red-tailed black cockatoo is a spirit bird, and black cockatoo in Australia is spirit bird right around our country. It's very important in all the cultures, the Aboriginal cultures. But I guess simply put, it resembles the old people, the ancestors, and they're very flighty birds. They take off. They don't really hang around. But I had this thing where these birds were in the tree, and actually. This is the feather. That's a male red-tailed black cockatoo, and that's a female. And that's a white-tailed black cockatoo, Karakin, from a different area. But there was this big old spirit bird, and she locked eyes with me, and I was looking at her in the tree, and she just started to screech and groan and talk to me. And as she did, I saw all these faces and places and visions, like memories in my mind, but they weren't my memories, they were things I'd never seen. And it was this kind of intense thing, and I felt really grounded to the earth and really emotional, and that was that, and left. Later that day I wrote the start of Spirit Bird just poured out of me, and I wrote it in the sand on the beach, the lyrics, and that was the sort of the start of the song, and then that was it, and it came through really heavily, and it was really emotional. And then for the next few years I just lived and did what I do, and there was a few other trips, and I didn't touch the song again. And when I was recording the record, I was up in Canada. I recorded up near Toronto on a lake. It was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was sitting by the fire, started to play the song again. And the whole back end of the song just sort of poured out of me, just came from nowhere. And it was really emotional again. And I kind of didn't understand it and kind of was like, whew, went to bed. The next morning I woke up and realised that at about 10 o'clock at night in North America, it was about midday back home, and the police had moved in on James Price Point where that gas plant is, and they started to drag the traditional owners off the country who was protesting against it, and all the protesters and kids, and it was a real scene, you know. The police moved in with force, and they brought the bulldozers in to claim the land and the whole thing. And so that song, and I had no idea, and the back end of the song poured out of me at that point. So it's kind of a long story, and sorry about that, but when I went back to the Kimberley, the next trip I did a trip across the top end, and we had these red-tailed black cockatoos following us morning and night, and at the very end of the trip, one dropped his feather, and it's very rare for them to do that. The guy I was travelling with he used to be a cameraman for Malcolm Douglas and did many trips through the Kimberley, and he'd never seen that before, so it was interesting. Yeah,
it's a great story. Big Lounge, put your hands together one more time. Xavier Rudd.